Today I'm sitting down with Shaun Lee Oliver, who is an incredible motivational speaker who goes into schools where children are learning, developing, growing, and meets them where they're at. He takes a completely fresh approach to connecting with them, and today we're going to unpack what that actually looks like. Shaun also authored the book I Wrote a Book on Purpose, which really deals with these topics and these pain points that these children are going through. Shaun, thank you for being on this season of parenting. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's really a privilege and an honor. Thank you. Thank you
Pleasure.
so much.
Now, Shaun, you are in schools
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
Tell me, what are these kids talking to you about that the parents at home might be a bit surprised to hear?
You know what I find is that a lot of kids are carrying hidden pain.
Mm,
They can't tell it to anyone. They can't let people know. But a lot of kids have got moments when nobody's around, when nobody's looking, where there's a lot of stuff going on the inside. And so many times what I do when I'm in the schools
mm,
is that I kind of touch on those things. There was one point where I said to somebody asked me, what do I do for a living? And I said, I go to schools and I make kids cry, because literally it happens where I'll go and I'll start talking and I'll do my talk. There's particular talks where it just kind of hits home, even yeah, and so it just kind of hits home and really makes a difference in their life. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
what sort of hidden pains are you talking about there?
Sure. Well, you know what? I find so many times that in today's world, there's a lot of broken families.
Mm,
That's one of the things. Divorce is huge. Before I started speaking in the schools, I used to be a teacher
mm,
for about 12 years myself. But I was always kind of the teacher that the kids would come to
mm,
at break and all that type of thing. And then I transitioned into a role of being a school counselor. And so there was one particular primary school where they would send their kids to my counseling office. And normally it was the naughtiest, it was the guys who were getting into trouble, it was the bullies, it was those kids who were coming through. And what I would find is that when I start talking to them, you find that, man, it's like I said, divorce is a big one.
mm,
I don't know what's the official statistics, but there's so many children who haven't got relationships with their dads.
mm,
That is
mm.
something that cannot be underestimated. The effect of that. Another thing is that oftentimes parents, unknowingly and probably from a good place, they compare kids.
Mm, mm,
They're putting so much pressure, and then obviously we have this thing of social media
mm,
and cyberbullying. And even if it's not directly said, our kids find themselves under so much pressure to perform,
mm,
so much
mm,
pressure to be better and to look better and to have, to trend and to have people like them. And,
mm,
and
mm.
so I think it's a different world. And I think that parents who were parented in the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, it's not the same for our kids in the
Mm-mm.
2020s,
No, it's a
and
it's a
yeah.
completely different ball game these days, and what worked then doesn't necessarily work now. We've got so
Yeah,
many different pressures, so many different conflicting viewpoints, and it's broader.
yeah,
Back in the 80s and the 90s, there was one person that you would probably turn to, and that was it, and that was the way it was done. Now, it's huge. There's such a big spectrum.
yeah, yeah.
So because there's so much noise, as everyone likes to call it,
Mm.
when your child is struggling or they're having a pain point, how do parents reconnect with them? Is it something that can be done? Is it, oh, well, my child won't talk to me now.
Mm.
What do I do as a parent to elicit that openness so that I know my child's pain point?
Yeah. Well, I think that the key word you brought out there was, to kind of talk.
Mm.
Because whether we want to admit it or not, conversation has not only died outside, in society, but it's
Yeah.
also died at home.
Mm.
That's the reality.
Mm.
Is that for, and I'm a parent. I've got 3 kids myself, and very busy, and my wife is also very busy in the corporate and so forth. But you know what? The reality is that we come in, from a busy day,
Mm.
and it's so easy to just take out your phone and to start scrolling,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so easy for our kids. We always, kind of prouded on ourselves on the fact that we don't have a TV in our home. Our kids
Mm.
grew up without a TV.
Mm.
But then at about 10 years old, they started getting cell phones, and guess what? Now they can see YouTube
Yeah.
shorts, and and it's worse now because, they can be in their room and they can be totally entertained,
Mm.
and the need for conversation is kind of, in our view, as humans, it's kind of diminished because
Mm.
we can just keep on filling that space,
Mm.
with TV, with entertainment, with a cat doing something crazy or somebody running into a wall. But at the end of the day, we need that human conversation. We need those, that talk.
Mm.
And so I think that it literally starts, to actually start talking to them again.
But
Yeah.
what do you do when your child just shuts you out or shuts you down? You try and have that conversation. It's so frustrating because as a parent, you see it and you're like, I see this as a problem. I see this is an issue. But you try start that conversation and your child shuts you down and they shut you down and they shut you down. And like what can we do to really help that and to break those walls down?
So I think that, for, like, for instance, I've got now, he's turning 16, and I've got a 13-year-old, she turns 14, and then I've got my 10-year-old.
Mm.
But many times what happens is that you have parents who, at the age of 14 or 15, they pick up there's a problem.
Mm.
Now they want to start developing a relationship, and I'm not saying that it's too late, because it's
No.
it's never too late.
Mm-mm.
But I'm saying, especially if you've got younger kids, start there. Start having the conversations when they're 2 and 3 years old.
Mm.
I spoke with someone who's involved with, because obviously been involved with just youth, on a national level and so forth. I
Mm.
spoke to someone, and they said, how do we reach the teens?
Mm.
And I said, you don't reach teens. I said, you reach them when they are 4 years old and
Mm.
5 years old and 6 years old. That's when the voice of a caring adult makes the biggest difference. But for most of us at that age, we want to put them in front of the TV, let them watch Peppa Pig. No offense to Peppa Pig, or, don't know if I'm allowed to say,
Mm.
but let them watch TV, and that's the time when they come with their little nonsense, and when they're talking about a flower, and they're so excited about, what, a friend said, and when they're singing off key, and that's the time to build that relationship. And I can tell you that when they're 14 and when they're 15, that foundation would have been established, that my mum and dad are the safe space. They are they are the people that I talk to when I'm being bullied or when things aren't going right. But if you haven't built that foundation, um, it doesn't just magically appear.
No, no, absolutely not. And I think it's so interesting that the examples you gave are very much childlike examples. I think a
Yeah.
lot of the times we have these expectations as parents that we need to say, "Oh, how was your day today?"
Mm,
Yeah, and that's such a broad question, and that's
mm.
not meeting the child where they are.
Yeah.
It's meeting them where we think they should be.
Yes. Yeah.
Versus, actually a flower is incredibly interesting.
Mm,
Let's talk about the flower. Let's talk about what it looks like and what does it mean to that child.
yeah.
So are those the types of conversations that parents should be having with those children at that age to really build that conversation? Or what sort of things, if I'm a parent, I want to build a really good
Mm.
relationship with my child, what type of conversation am I having with them?
I like that you said, for instance, how was your day?
Mm.
But it's too broad.
Mm.
So I would say, for instance, and this is a rule that we have enforced, and it's worked since, my kids were small. Most of us, we have to drive our kids to school, and there's that comment: we don't put the radio on. We're not listening to, any radio stations. We use that time to talk. When I pick them up in the afternoons, I talk, and I won't ask how was your day.
Mm.
I would say, like, what made you laugh today? Tell me about your friends. Tell me what this one said. Tell me what that one said. Is there anything that made you really angry today?
Mm.
Did somebody make you sad today? And so very specific questions, that, because if you ask them, how was your day? Fine.
Mm.
What
Mm.
did you learn at school? Nothing, type of thing. And then the parents think the child doesn't want to talk, but you've got to be. So what happened in maths class today?
Mm.
How's that new teacher? It's these type of things that can really be, oftentimes the discipline issue is not that our kids, for instance, they don't want to behave or they
Mm.
want to be, but the thing is that many times there isn't clarity
Mm.
on, and many times our communication is not clear. And so I would say that is a thing you can do, is to just kind of speak to them, establish a that it's part of your home culture, is that we talk about the day, we talk about these things. And I have found the car ride is gold,
My mum
you know.
says the same thing.
Yeah,
I'm one of three, and she said that car ride from school,
yeah,
you girls just unloaded,
yeah,
downpacked, we spoke about your day, and she said that was golden.
yeah,
That time right there was golden.
yeah.
For parents who don't have that opportunity of a car ride,
Mm.
there's some parents, they're not able to do that. Children are taken by other people or transport or whatever the case may be. How might that parent engage with their child where they're missing that window of opportunity where that child might be a bit more receptive?
I would say, like, for instance, obviously everyone has got different schedules, and
Mm.
but somewhere along the line, you've got to prioritize um, parenting. And parenting isn't just putting out rules like you must do this, you must do that. Parenting is also playing with these kids.
Mm.
In fact, children learn before they go to school, and before you say you must do this. How does the smallest child learn? Just through play, just through connection. You don't need to put a rule to for a baby to say you must speak now, you must walk now, you must know. They Because they spend time in the presence of their parents, it kind of flows naturally, you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
And
Mm.
just on that, the best teachers for our children is us.
Mm.
If you think about the biggest moves that your child has ever made when it comes to learning how to eat, when it comes to learning how to walk and learning how to talk, you didn't send them away to a teacher. It started with you. And you know what? When it comes to learning kindness and sharing and being helpful and becoming um, a role player in society, don't hand it off to the kids. Now they're 6 years old. Now, it's up to the teachers, not my problem anymore.
Yeah.
We are the best teachers they could ever have,
Mm.
you know.
So, Shaun, you mentioned there about discipline. Discipline is such a big topic. Where do we even start with that?
So, you know, my overarching theory, on this whole thing on discipline is this: it's that rules without relationship breeds rebellion. And so basically what that means is that I've met parents who, for instance, they just want to lay down the law. They feel
Mm.
that now that, and maybe it's because that's how they were raised. And
Mm.
so it's a type of a thing that when I get big, when I have my own children, they're not going to do this. I'm going to, I'm going to say that this. But if you don't have a relationship with your kids, all you're going to end up with is rebellion later on. And so those kids will fight against it. And
Mm.
so when it comes to discipline, I think that the first thing, before there can be correction, there must be connection. And so this is so important. And many times what happens is that, again, parents are just kind of out there trying to be boss. You are not the boss in your home. You're their mummy, you're their daddy, and it's a different role.
I think that's such a brilliant overarching way to define discipline.
Yeah.
Is that rules without relationship breeds rebellion. I mean, fundamentally, that is so on point. So then take us through, if we need that connection, what does that look like? If before we even get to rules, we need connection. So how do we connect?
Um, Again, I think it's the conversations. So it's probably the the number one. And it doesn't have to be a pre-planned conversation. It doesn't have to be, something that is even well thought of. It's just talking. You know, yesterday, my 10-year-old, she wanted to go buy a gift for one of her friends. So after school, we took her to one of the stores, and there was a squishy, but where you squish it, it's kind of a squishy in a doll. So when you squish it, it's kind of like the stomach pops out, you know. And I picked up this thing, and I was like, take this," and she was absolutely, she was hysterical. She was laughing about it, and then I saw, because we were at the plush toys, and I saw a little hot dog, you know, and I picked it up and I said to it, "Buy this for your friend, you know. She loves it, and I can see she likes food, you know." And it was just a funny moment, you know. It was just like, and I wasn't trying to tease the friend or anything, but you know what? It's in these moments that we build connection. You know, there has to be a little bit of us that's a little bit impromptu,
Mm.
and where we're willing to just kind of see the funny side of life. Another thing that happened as we were entering the shopping mall. Now she's a petite little cute thing, and she's small built for her age, and so she's got on her blazer and a tie and everything. And as she walked in, she kind of overstepped on the one of the carpets, and she almost fell, you know. And I looked, and you know, almost like a laughing, and there was a guy who walked, and he also looked, and we both burst out laughing, you know. And she was like, "I can't believe you all just," you know, we both kind of, and but it's, you know what, we've got to learn to laugh with them
Mm.
and laugh at them and let them laugh at us, you
Mm.
know, because again, as we play together, that's also part of parenting. You know, and so don't be afraid to play with them. And playing is not playing video games. I'm so
Mm.
sorry.
Mm.
They could be, but you know what? Play a game of cards.
Mm.
Teach them Crazy Eight, you know, Donkey, you know, just go fish. You know, there's so many games that are appropriate. You know, our house, I hope every home has got Monopoly, 30 seconds, the kids' version. You know, these are things that we can do that will get them off of their phones and get them more connected to us.
Absolutely. And I think so often we have this idea that we have to be the perfect parent.
Mm,
We have to be the parent that gets it right every time. We almost can't have fun in a way because
mm.
that's not me being on point and that's my child doing this. And when we take all that away and we just see it for what it is, a human connection,
Yes.
I think parents will go, actually, you know what? It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't have to have it perfect. I don't have to have it all together. I can enjoy the moment for what it is.
Yes. Yeah.
So then we've got connection.
Mm.
Okay, we've connected with our child. We have a great relationship. We bring discipline into that. What does discipline look like?
It doesn't look like beating and shouting. I know that some people will get very upset with me and want to, but it really, for me, it doesn't look like that. And I'm not, you know, you get like gentle parenting. I'm not pushing that, you know. But I also see that if you can kind of get this thing happening, you won't need to
Mm,
hit anyone. You
mm,
won't need to honestly even shout or to scream. You know, I've oftentimes when I do like a parenting workshop, I'll show this to the parents. You know how this happens oftentimes at home, where for instance our parents get home, and understandably we are tired. We have got work to do. There's some outstanding emails, and for some of us, maybe we just want to, you know, kind of go on social media and just kind of relax, you know.
mm,
And what happens is that our children are there, and they're busy and they're doing their thing. And actually, you know, when they kind of playing nicely and they, you know, just kind of doing their thing, or you know, what happens is that we pat ourselves on the back and it's like, okay, great, you know what, I'm doing good. I can get a moment of peace. And then what'll happen is that, let's say the child accidentally breaks something, or they get into a fight. The two siblings start
mm,
arguing and fighting, you know. Um, and at that moment, do you know what we do? We put everything down. We'll put the
mm,
phone down. We'll slam down that laptop, you know. We'll leave our cooking, and what we'll do is that we'll come and we'll kind of approach this child, and our attention has gone away from the laptop and everything else, and our attention is on the child. And
mm,
if you've ever, I know that nobody watching has ever done this, but if you've ever
mm.
shouted at your child, okay, you'll know that you look at the person, you know, and all of your attention, you kind of lean into them,
Mm,
and
mm.
you know, and what does that say to, little Tommy or Susie or whatever her name is? It says, you know what? When I am bad, I get the attention that I was looking for. Now mommy has time for me. Now daddy has time for
Mm.
me. And you know what our children are doing? And I say this often in the parenting workshops and even with educator workshops at schools that, you know what, guys, you need to get this, that there are no such things as bad kids.
Mm.
There's no such thing as a bad child. But what these children are doing is that they are looking for the attention. Okay, they are looking for the connection that they were made to receive from you.
Mm. Mm.
And oftentimes what happens is, and so that's why I say that, some kids are literally addicted to shouting. Because from the age of 1 or 2 or 3 years old, whenever they done something bad, they got shouted. And it's kind of like, why would anyone want to be shouted?
Mm.
Well, you know what? It's better than being ignored. And so, yeah.
That's I think that's probably a bit of a harsh reality for some of us to face. I mean, I know I'm guilty of shouting at my children once
Mm,
or twice before. And that's, I suppose, as a parent, that's kind of really confronting in a way because it actually, when you phrase it as your child becomes addicted to shouting,
mm.
it completely flips the narrative. It's no longer about responding to behavior. It's you are actually training your child to behave in a certain manner.
Yeah.
So in that moment where you've put your laptop down, you've stopped cooking, you've turned your phone off, what should our response be? And obviously,
Mm.
you talk a lot about connection, but obviously we can't ignore the behavior that's
Yeah, yeah.
happening. We do have to address what's going on. How do we address it in a way that's not shouting, that's not confrontational, and gets our child used to a way that we want them to respond?
Well, I think that, so for instance, in that moment, it's to remember, I'm always trying to kind of get this over to my kids is that, when you, in an argument, you raise the level, no, actually, it goes like this: raise the level of your argument, not the level of your voice. And I think the same applies for our kids.
Absolutely.
So what I would say is that I would first of all, talk to them specifically, not how could you do this.
Mm.
Okay, and how are they going to answer it? How could you do this? No, rather, be specific, very specific, very clear. Like for instance, what happened here?
Mm.
Why? And you could ask, why did you do this? But let them hear y- the let them hear your words, and not the level of your voice.
Mm. Mm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So for instance, again, the premise is that there's no bad kids,
Mm.
you know, um, but there are kids who need to be corrected, and there are kids who need, some type of guidance and navigation. And so
Mm.
the thing is to say, okay, um, you know, this is what you've done wrong. And then from there can be consequence, but it should be, conversation into correction into consequence, and not just consequence right
Mm.
away.
Mm.
So we start with the conversation. Why did this happen? Okay, why did you pull your sister's hair?
Mm. Mm.
Okay, the correction is, you shouldn't do that because it hurts her. And then the consequence is, and there needs to be a consequence. The consequence is that, you're going to be in a timeout, or
Mm.
whatever it is.
Mm.
And the thing is that, again, children don't need, and you've mentioned it, children don't need perfect parents,
Mm.
but they do need consistent parenting, you know
Yep.
and so they do need to know, because that's one of the ways that we set the boundary up. They know, when I, um, do this, I hit into this wall, you
Mm.
know
Mm.
and we need to. And the thing, this thing about, having the boundaries, is important, not just because it's a, it's a rule based thing. Like this room we in, there's a boundary, there's a wall. It
Mm.
protects us.
Mm.
And so, the discipline, the boundaries, it kind of all just comes together.
Mm.
But shouting and losing your temper isn't going to help anything. In
Mm.
fact, they say, children learn what they live. Children are great imitators.
Mm-hmm.
So if my child sees me losing my temper when things go wrong, they're going to do it with others.
Exactly. It's so true. And then you see that and you go, but why are you shouting?
Mm.
Maybe I need to stop and have a look and see where they learned that behavior.
Yeah.
So let's take this into a school context. So that's obviously you spend a lot of time talking to learners. These types of behaviors, how do they show up at school? And where is the disconnect between parents and behaviors? I know you talk about it's being young, but obviously, you might think as a parent, "Oh, my child's fine, everything's good, they're a nice child, they're well-rounded." And then suddenly the teacher says, your child has a problem. So what sort of things are you seeing in schools that, lead back to this type of lack of boundaries, for example?
Sure. Man, you know what? Let me just say, I admire our educators.
Mm,
I admire our
mm-hmm,
teachers. They have got so much to deal with.
mm,
And as a parent, you can never know. And as somebody who spent 12 years in school classrooms, I can tell you that you never know what's happening behind those closed doors.
mm-mm.
And so, first of all, hats off to educators.
100%.
But what's happening in the schools is that you've got, man, a lot of bullying. You have a lot of kids who are trying to find identity, and that's why there
Mm,
could be a parent who, their child is, an absolute angel at home, but the teachers are saying, this happened and this, and your child and this. And if I can say one thing to parents, I would tell them never go against the teacher. Always, as
mm,
far as possible,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
don't degrade the teacher in the eyes of their child. Because
Mm.
so don't, because this is our kids. Our kids are going to come on with stories.
Oh,
And our kids
absolutely.
are going to sometimes exaggerate the story, and they're going to, and that's what we do too, because
Mm,
we always want to be the hero of our own story. That's just how
absolutely.
life works.
Yeah.
And so your child will come with the story and they'll say this thing that the teacher done. And there's a rule that we've tried to have. We haven't got it right all the time. But you know what? It's to not kind of pull the teacher down. What's wrong
Mm,
with the school? Man, you
mm,
might. No, you know what? What's happening is that sometimes your children are in that classroom and they're trying to find their space. And it's perfectly normal.
mm,
If you look at the psychology of child development, the first 6 years is cleaving to mommy and daddy.
mm.
And from that 6 until about what, 12, 13 years old, there's this gradual shift. I think there's about 2 or 3 years where the teacher knows everything. And if you have a small a child in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, you'll know, it's not my mommy this, my mommy that. It's the teacher says this and the
Mm.
teacher says that.
So
And
true.
then a little bit later on, it's gonna be all about the friends.
Mm,
My friend this and it's completely normal.
mm,
Let your children go through those phases.
mm, mm.
But please understand that they're trying to find identity in a world where there's what, a billion different
Ah,
identities. you
yes.
know and there's the pressure from social media, and the pressure to be like this one and to be like that one. And sometimes a good kid is going to do a bad thing,
Mm,
you know
mm,
because they want attention, because they want to establish their identity within that classroom, within that school. And so, yeah, what we need to do is, when the teacher comes with something, first of all, don't just dismiss it.
mm,
And the second thing is, again, finding out from your child what is actually going on,
mm,
what's been happening, and why did you do this? We all have an underlying need, that affects our behaviors.
mm, mm.
And so that is something that, I don't know if I answered that question. I feel as if I
No,
went off. Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I feel like there's
Mhm,
such an important message in that though,
mhm,
is that so often we go to uh, place blame. We want to place blame on someone, on something, whatever the case may be. And
mhm.
quite often we don't place that blame on ourselves. We like to place it externally. I think that's a human nature thing.
Yeah.
But not tearing down your child's teacher,
Mm.
I think, is a message that's not conveyed.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
normally, oh, it's the school's problem.
Mm.
As you said, it's the teacher's problem. I think or help me understand. How do I build that relationship then with my child's teacher? Because if your child is not incredibly naughty or gifted, they sit in this middle
Yeah.
broad spectrum of, hey, your child's okay.
Mm.
What does okay mean?
Yeah.
Help me understand that. So let's get back to the question of, how do I build that relationship with my child's teacher?
I wish I had an answer for that. Honestly, I've seen it becoming more and more clear.
Mm,
At schools again because our schedules are getting so busy, or schools, and I guess we all society is becoming more efficient
mm,
now.
mm,
But there's no more in many schools. There isn't like a parents' evening. It's
mm-mm,
like only if you've gotten a letter because your child's in trouble. Now you get to see
mm,
and it seems like there's emails, but I would say just be proactive,
mm.
but many times I wish that there was something that we could do more. I know that the schools at many points are trying to protect their teachers.
Yeah.
You won't believe how many stories I've got of where principals and teachers get attacked by parents. Yeah, yeah.
By
It
parents.
happens. It happens, and
Sure.
so I do understand the need for security and for those type of limits. And in today's world, for instance, I know that during COVID they started WhatsApp groups, but
Yes.
then the parents were like, not giving the teachers a gap. So now
Mm,
most schools have a class parent and they don't have direct contact to the
the
to the
teacher.
actual teacher, and I understand it.
Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
it's also important to remember that a teacher has seen 300 kids maybe,
Mm,
you know
mm.
um and so, yeah, they may miss your child, but may you never miss your child.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
I truly believe that, and it's a saying somewhere that I read somewhere, that it says, um clap so loud for your child that they can't hear the
Mm.
sounds of those who aren't, the silence of those who are not clapping for them.
No,
And so what I
absolutely.
do is that my thing is, I don't know what the teacher's going to do. I don't know what their friends at school are going to say to them. But
Mm.
if I can clap so loudly for them that it drowns out the voices, the negative voices around them,
Mm.
I've done my job,
Absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know?
As you said, coming back to the connection.
Yeah,
Get right from the start, connecting with your child so they know that you are a safe space.
yeah,
They know how you're going to react and respond at any given situation. It's not this completely volatile person that they're having to live with. Because I think of it in a practical sense. If you've got a housemate
mm,
or a roommate or even a sibling and they're very emotionally volatile, you want nothing to do with them.
yes, yeah,
It's the same for our kids. I've seen it with my own. If I'm having a really tough day and I can't take a moment to compose myself, my children just show me exactly what I'm doing.
yeah. No,
It's confronting sometimes.
it's the truth. And so many times our disciplining is out of fear, you
It
know?
isn't it
So again,
just?
it's that, you cannot use fear to control your children,
No.
because then what'll happen is, like we had said earlier, either they're going to, become the tyrant themselves,
Mm,
or they're going to live their lives as a victim because
mm,
somebody else will come along and use fear to control them. And
absolutely.
so you want to raise kids who they are making decisions out of a core. If I
Mm,
could share,
mm.
just in 5 minutes, I use a coffee cup to speak to kids. I've actually, so since COVID, I put a message together. So before that, I spent a lot of time in the schools. We're sitting on about 400. It keeps on ticking up at about 468,000 young people, face-to-face
Sure.
assemblies. I'm kind of the crisis guy. So when there's suicide or attempted suicide, or when the teachers pick up on it, the schools will many times call me in, and it happens more than we know. I think
Mm,
that statistics bear witness to that. And I think it's the number one mental disease amongst young people is depression,
mm,
anxiety. But what happened is in one of my classes, we were doing group counseling sessions. I was going from class to class. It was still half classes at that stage. I think it was 2021, early 2021. This little girl, I greeted the class, good morning, class, good morning, sir, and how are you guys doing? And they all said, like they do in school, like they taught to, nothing wrong with it. Fine, thank you. And how are
mm,
you, sir? Fine, thank you. Please sit down. And then I started going around. through each child, and I asked them, how are you really doing? What's
Mm.
going on? And there was this little girl, I can't remember her name, but I remember her face. I can see her standing in front of me. And she said she's fine, but I found out when I asked her, really, is she fine? She lost her mum and dad. I think within the space of about 6 to 8 months,
Sure.
both of them died due to COVID and
Wow.
surrounding circumstances. But she said she's fine. And from there, I thought, I've got to do something. So I put together a message which I call Stronger.
Mm.
And I've taken it to literally hundreds of thousands of kids in schools across South Africa. And all I use is the cup. And what I do is I take this cup and basically I show them, and it's silly and we laugh, and at a point we sing SpongeBob SquarePants and all that type of thing. But at a point I say that every single one of us are just like this cup.
Mm.
And then they're all like, and what I do is I show them, that when you are going to put coffee into this cup, it goes in at the top, it stops, and it fills you, and it fills up. And when you had breakfast in the morning, you didn't put it in at the bottom, the side, you put it in the top. It comes at the top, it stops, and it fills us up.
Mm.
But it's not only with food, it's not only with coffee or cold
Mm.
drink. Every single day we are getting filled with experiences that create emotions,
Mm.
and so, for instance, and then I'll use that to point out, has anyone ever had that moment where you thought you were going to do good in the test, and the teacher starts handing out the tests, and she calls out the 10 out of 10s and the 9 out of 10s, and they're celebrating, and you thought, what's going on? And next thing you know, when the teacher gets to about 5, then you get your paper, and all of a sudden you were filled. Nobody hit you, nobody pushed you, but you were filled with a feeling. And it
Mm.
came in and it set you. And there's so many kids who will go out into the playground, and a child will decide that we don't want to play with you. We don't like you anymore.
Mm.
And there was no fighting, because fighting and pushing is how. But that child got filled with an emotion, a feeling of
Mm.
rejection. Then I bring it even closer to home, and maybe I can bring it close to the home of the viewers today. There's some children who they may have gone through. Their parents have gone through a divorce,
Mm.
and they hurting and they broken inside, and there was a message that was sent, not consciously, because no parent's ever going to say, oh, you know what, we've moved on with our life, but there's some children who interpret that message like, oh,
Mm.
you know what, and so what happens is that we get fooled. My son, as he started to get a little bit older, I started to let him watch movies that's a little bit scary, age appropriate.
Mm.
And he'll sit on the couch. It's our house, it's our couch. The gates are locked, the dogs are in the yard, we live in Joburg. The alarm system is on. All of that stuff
Mm.
is there, and our bedroom is just down the hallway. But he's sitting and he's watching, and nothing is changing around him, but something's changing on the inside of him.
Mm.
And he's been filled with this. And at that moment, like a good dad, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, sneak up on him and boo, type of thing. That's like, a dad role. That's what we're supposed to do, but it's interesting because it just goes to prove the point that every single day we're getting filled.
Mm.
But the reality is that, and this is the message I take to the school, is if I put coffee into this cup and you bump into me, what's going to come out?
Coffee.
It's coffee. You can only give what you've got. If I
Mm.
fill a cup with Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola is going to come out. If I fill a cup with coffee, coffee is going to come out. If I fill a child with pain, pain is going to come out. If I fill them with rejection and insults and abandonment and neglect, and you know what, that is going to come out when they are bumped.
Mm.
It's the
Mhm.
reality. You can only give what you've got. In
So
fact,
true.
from the time we were younger, we were taught this, and we've passed it on to our kids. We
Mm.
would have teachers come into the class and they say, what's wrong with you? You guys must behave. Come on, just behave. Why can't you behave better?
Mm.
And I passed that as a parent onto my own kids. Come on, you need to behave a little bit better. Come on, just behave. And what I do at
Uh-huh.
the school, and it's like a light bulb moment, and maybe it'll be a light bulb moment at home. I say, do you remember syllables? And can we break the word behave down into its 2 syllables?
Mm.
And then I'll get everyone to clap. Let me quickly put this down. I'll get everyone to clap, behave, like we used to do,
Yeah.
And what's the first word? Be. What's the second word? Have. But there's no such a word as have. The word is have. So essentially, it's one of the biggest revelations that we can have in understanding people and understanding ourselves. You can only be what you have,
So
you know,
true.
be what you have. And so when we are bringing discipline and rules, whenever we're saying you must behave, you must do this, we're saying be what you have. But many times our focus is not on what's in the cup, on
Mm.
what we've got, but on what's coming out. And so what we've got to do is, if we want to see our children's behavior improve, if we want to see discipline improve,
Mm.
we've got to ask ourselves, what is in the cup? Because I can only give what I've got, you know? And so, oh man, if I could almost like summarize discipline and
Mm.
boundaries and all that
Mm.
stuff, what have they got? What's in their cup? What have they got to give?
Yeah.
If you don't like what's coming out of the cup, the reality is that you change the contents. And how do you change the contents? Well, this is what you do. You find a sink, because what you got to do is you got to get the stuff from here out there. You've got to get what's here out there. And you find a sink, and I teach them, not everyone is a sink. Some people, you tell them your stories, and it's going to be all over social media.
Yes.
So what we've got to do is you've got to find a sink. A sink represents a safe place, a person, hopefully a parent,
Mm.
but sometimes it's not,
Mm.
unfortunately,
Mm.
a grandparent, a teacher, a church leader, but somebody that is a safe space, and you start a conversation, and you start talking about those things that maybe you've hidden for a while.
Mm.
You've pressed it down, you know. When people come to me and, oh, I'm so depressed, whatever, I show them, we are a cup.
Mm.
And what's happening is that you can only handle so much. So this is what we do. We press down, we press down, we press down. I don't want to deal with with the parent who passed, who died a while back. I don't want to deal with the bullying. I don't want anyone to know that this is happening. And so I press it down, and then I get them to, again, using some English skills, come on, put the two words press down together. Depress.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that I say to them, don't keep on pressing it down. Start the conversations.
Mm.
And then what you do is that as you pour out the bad stuff, you pour in the good stuff. I do see a lot of stuff.
Mm.
I see a lot of stuff. But what I've learned is that I keep on refilling so that I can give.
Amazing.
And it's the only way for us to kind of live this life. And as a parent, the reality is that if you are not aware of what's in your cup, you're going to spill all over your children.
So true.
And so we're going to come with our stress because of the price of fuel, and our stress because of the war, and our stress because of what somebody said and what the neighbor did and what the boss did. And we come with all of that stress, and then we spill that stress and that mess onto our children. And we expect them to not do the same. But we can only give what we've got. We can only be what we have.
Shaun, I've never heard anyone phrase it in such a way that makes so much sense, but is so hard hitting at the same time. So thank you so much for being a part of this conversation today. It has been so insightful. Honestly, thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.
Don't forget about Shaun's book. I wrote a book on purpose, which is all about living with intentionality and not by accident. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you soon.